inside Latin America. I'm Lucia Newman, and this is the Panama Canal. The ship you see here is on its way to the canal locks to pass from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean. Panama is right in the middle, and not just geographically. As everybody knows, in a battlefield, the worst place to be is caught in the middle, especially when the opposing sides are the United States and China. I'll tell you more about how that impacts Panama, but first we go to my colleague Mariana Sanchez in Peru, another country that's being caught in a potentially explosive tug of war for hemispheric power.
Thanks, Lucia. The port of Chancay is a Chinese-Peruvian enterprise that can dock some of the largest ships in the world. Since inauguration 18 months ago, it's turned into a major maritime hub in the southeastern Pacific, but also quickly turning into a battleground between the U.S. and China. The $1.3 billion private investment has been built as a state-of-the-art commercial port, but the U.S. is wary. Chinese COSCO Shipping owns 60% of the shares. U.S. officials say Chancay is of dual use for trade and potentially for military purposes. That red flag, critics say, to sever Peru's relationship with China. The campaign is aggressive. In January, the State Department designated Peru as a major non-NATO ally. That secures further defense cooperation in training and equipment. Then the U.S. Congress approved selling equipment to modernize a naval base near Callao, Peru's first port. The U.S. ambassador to Peru says he'll secure his country's national interest, as he sponsored a controversial purchase of 12 F-16 fighter jets in April. U.S. officials say Peru's sovereignty is at risk.
You cannot outsource your sovereignty to the enemies of the United States of America, period.
Beijing rejects the allegations outright, saying the U.S. is spreading a smear campaign to distort cooperation between China and Peru. Severing ties with China is unthinkable. It is Peru's #1 trade partner. But the second most important is the United States. Analysts say the next president will have to walk a fine line to keep the relationship with both countries smooth. Trade between them exceeded $50 billion last year. Diplomats say Peru's foreign policy has been consistent for decades.
Peru cannot act internationally or internally except in accordance with its national interests. In strategic, military, economic, social and diplomatic matters, Peru cannot make any internal or external decisions based on the interests of others.
The potential military use of this port is a long shot. The law here forbids foreign military bases.
The U.S.-built Panama Canal is one of the world's two most strategic artificial waterways. Without it, ships sailing from east to west and west to east would have to go 8,000 nautical miles further, all the way around Cape Horn. When U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to take it back unless the Chinese companies that ran two of its ports were kicked out, Panama agreed, and now China is striking back. The Panama Canal has run smoothly for more than a century. But the smooth sailing ended abruptly in February when Panama expelled the Chinese company that ran two commercial ports on either side of the canal, arguing its contract was unconstitutional. The White House celebrated it as, quote, a triumph for President Donald Trump. But Beijing made good on its threat to make Panama pay for caving into U.S. pressure. A large percentage of international cargo ships are bound for China, and that's exactly where Beijing is applying its punishment. Chinese port authorities are detaining commercial ships that carry the Panama flag, until recently the world's most widely used. 140 were detained just last month, compared to 23 in January. Delays and additional inspections mean significant expenses and operational uncertainty. Former Panama Maritime Authority President Fernando Solórzano calls the situation critical.
If the trend continues, it will cause serious damage to the Panama flag. Among other things, it means the flag will go from being on the white list to the gray or even black list. Shipping companies don't want limits that cost them a huge premium.
Hundreds of commercial shipping companies are already abandoning the flag, a major economic blow for Panama. The canal itself is not a target.
It's a very strategic point. The Panama Canal has to be open. It's a neutral operation by treaties, and it has to stay that way so that we can serve all countries of the world.
But as a dominant source of container shipments, China is also blacklisting the canal's ports. After meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State, Panama withdrew from its Belt and Road Infrastructure Agreement with China. Adding insult to injury, a Chinese monument built to honor 180 years of bilateral ties was bulldozed on New Year's Eve, leaving only these lions as a reminder. So, despite recent Panamanian efforts to win back China's favor, Beijing appears to be sending a broader region-wide message that it doesn't easily forgive and forget. Panama was the very first country that Marco Rubio visited when he became Secretary of State. He has become the face of Donald Trump's focus on Latin America and the Caribbean. For more on how Rubio is now the point man for Washington's hemispheric strategy, let's go to Manuel Rapalo at the State Department.
Thanks, Lucia. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has emerged as the public face of the Trump administration's policy in Latin America. Since becoming America's top diplomat, Rubio has traveled to nearly a dozen countries in the region, including Panama, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, and the Dominican Republic, underscoring what the administration calls a renewed focus on the Western Hemisphere.
Generally speaking, it is now a region filled with American allies, American-friendly leaders, and an America-friendly direction. Now, obviously, we have to operationalize that into action after 20 years of neglect, in which China and other global powers have intruded in our Western Hemisphere to the detriment not just of American national interest, but to the detriment, in our view, of the people of those countries as well.
Secretary Rubio has logged thousands of miles across the region, meeting presidents and regional leaders while advancing some of President Trump's top priorities. In El Salvador and Guatemala, discussions focused heavily on migration and deportation agreements. In Mexico, Rubio emphasized cooperation against organized crime. In Ecuador, he backed tougher measures against criminal gangs, part of a broader effort to frame transnational crime as a U.S. national security threat. Rubio has also defended some of the administration's most controversial actions in the region, including the operation that removed Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro from power and expanded efforts targeting drug trafficking networks. The Trump administration increasingly sees Latin America not as a secondary foreign policy concern, but as a region directly tied to U.S. security, migration, and economic interests. And Marco Rubio has become the administration's chief messenger, negotiator, and architect of that strategy. Lucia, back to you.
Thanks, Manuel. In the last 3 decades, Latin America has gone from being practically off Washington's radar to being once again regarded, and rather pejoratively, as the United States' backyard. And now China, too, wants to call the shots. We went to speak to former Panamanian diplomat and politician Guillermo Cortés about how the region can navigate between the two economic superpowers. Mr. Cortés, is it possible for countries like Panama, Peru, and others to remain in the middle, or do you ultimately have to take sides?
Rubio visited Panama 10 days after the assumption of Donald Trump. In certain way, he gave orders to the Panamanian government.
So what you're saying is that the United States definitely calls the shots.
Sure. In addition, the day on March that we knew about the decision of the Panamanian Supreme Court, in the morning, U.S. papers have the decision before us. They knew in the United States the decision before us. It's no coincidence of the influence of the Americans in our policies.
Well, you're talking about the United States, but what about China? China isn't taking this lying down either. It's retaliating.
Yeah, because China in certain way have the right to retaliate. And I think we will be losing a lot of money, and the United States will not come to help us. No, that will be your problem. That's what Trump will say. The problem of the peers, it will be yours.
But can Panama afford the retaliation that it's receiving now from China?
No. We have to maintain a good relationship with the Chinese. And as in the same way the United States is trying to have a good relationship with China, our countries have the right to do so. What they can do that, but we can't. No, that's not correct.
So how can countries in this region resist the pressure from China and the United States to ultimately take sides?
I think the main problem is the lack of unity of American countries, Latin American countries. We are not working together anymore. And that avoids our countries to have a common position in front of the United States. We require more respect from the United States. We know that we have to have the best relationship with the United States, better than with China, but that doesn't mean we have to exclude China or exclude any other country.
From Venezuela to Cuba, from Panama, Peru, and beyond, Latin America is again at the center of a geopolitical battle for influence. And that's it from us. For more news, now back to our global headquarters in Doha.